Today, I'm going to be ranking champions in the mid lane for League of Legends patch 25.19. A lot of champions were changed on this patch. There were quite a few buffs having had, and quite a few builds have been discovered that kind of shakes up the ranking of champions. This tier list is mainly aimed at Diamond and below. If you're above that rank, I'm so sorry, this tier list is just not meant for you. Most of my audience is Diamond and below, so that's where I aim my tier lists. I should also mention this video is going to be quite long because I have not ranked champions in quite a while, so my old tier lists were out of date, so I have to fully revamp everything. Future tier lists will be a bit shorter, but that's why this video is going to be quite long, so I apologize for that already. If, by the way, you want to improve at the game, there's a link in the description where you can enter your email, and I will send you tips that I have learned from over thousands of hours of coaching, condensed into just a few emails that I'll send to your inbox. And I'm writing new emails as we're speaking as well, because there are new things that I think people should be doing to improve at the game that I need to update. But let us get into it. So, first of all, Ahri. Now, many of you know me as an Ahri player. I am a Ahri main. That has been probably my claim to fame here on YouTube, right? That is what I started off my branding with, and I was rank 1 Ahri on the NA servers. I've been playing unranked to Diamond on Ahri recently as well. She got some buffs that gives her a lot more damage in team fights, and I think with her Blackfire Torch build, she has a lot of versatility in terms of that build allows you to kind of overcome some of the team compositions Ahri really struggled at dealing with earlier, where you could only play Malignance plus Horizon Focus. With Blackfire Torch, you can now deal with more bruisery and fightery champions. You're still not great against tanks, but you have more options now. And she's just receiving a bunch of flat damage on her ult. So I think this does probably put her into either an A or an S tier. I'm going to keep her A tier for now and then see where I want to put more champions the more we move on. Akali, I think she's a little bit too complicated for a lot of lower MMR players, so I'm not really sure that she has a spot higher up on the ladder. She is very, very annoying to play against in the laning phase. One of the largest complaints I hear from people is, wow, Akali is so frustrating to play against. But if you actually look at the stats and look at how she performs in the game, it's not great. And the reason for that is Akali is very, very difficult to maneuver in team fights. So I'm going to actually slot her into a C tier, which you might find very surprising. But I don't think you should be playing Akali if you are not in about master tier and above. I think that's where Akali really starts shining. Now, the next pick is going to be a little bit surprising to you. We're talking about Anivia. And Anivia goes straight in the S tier. And you might be saying to me, what are you, Espen, are you okay? Like, did you hit your head this morning? What's going on? Like, did this typhoon that's ravaging in Hanoi right now, did it get to you? And no. But Anivia is so phenomenal as a champion. Even across, like, all elos. I think even in Challenger, Anivia is great. Why? She's very, very unique. She doesn't have a lot of games played, so people don't know how to play against her. She does a ton of damage. She wave clears incredibly, incredibly well. She pushes in the laning phase after level 6 incredibly, incredibly well. She scales very well into team fights. She controls objectives very well, and she has very, very strong roaming potential. So she scales, she pushes, she controls, and she roams. She does everything you want a champion to do. So I'm very tempted to even put her in S+, but for now I'm going to keep her in S tier. Annie, she saw some nerfs recently, and I think she's running into a lot of tough matchups in the mid lane. There was an iteration of her where she ran Malignance plus Phase Rush plus Bloodlust Curse and played more as an engage shredder. I think that still has viability. The problem is she does not have a ton of damage with the new builds that are being played in terms of like damage to 1v9 fights. She still has a ton of utility and a ton of setup, and she's great for learning the game. So if you are iron or bronze and you need to learn how to play laning phase and how to trade, Annie is awesome. But I think in terms of just raw carry potential in solo queue, Annie just doesn't have the damage to do it. She is reliant on her teammates to follow up on her engages. And if there's one thing you don't want to be in solo queue, it's reliant on your teammates. So I think she's going to slot into C tier as well. Aurelion Sol. I don't need to say anything else. Actually, yeah, I do. Probably S tier, not S+. But the reason Aurelion Sol is so good in low elo, he scales very, very well. He pushes waves. He can like carry fights. He has a ton of damage, and he's very, very difficult to end games against because of his E. So I just really like Aurelion Sol for lower MMR players. I think he's a band-aid that can make you climb way above what you deserve in terms of being able to play laning phase. And in my head, that means he has to go high in the tier list, right? The build that you can go on him as well, by the way, there are 2 iterations of him. One takes Blackfire Torch with Rylai's Liandry's, and then you can go Comet with Bone Plating. There's another iteration where you run Rylai's into Liandry's straight up, and then you take Precision Secondary to help with your Manation. So you'd go Presence of Mind and Cut Down in that variation. I have a video playing Aurelion Sol as well, if you want to check that out. Feel free. Aurora in lower elo. She was recently nerfed, so I don't think she deserves to be very high. Her passive was nerfed quite a bit, which is one of the reasons she was so good, is she could shred tanks very, very hard with her passive. So I think she has to be B and below for sure. Probably B tier. She can still beat a lot of champions, and she still has a lot of proactive tool and playmaking for creating picks on mid lane with her W into ult. You can catch 80 carries very easily overextending, and she is still annoying in the side lane, but she lost a lot of damage potential. Next, Azir. Champ is too difficult. Don't play him. Like, Azir he is kept in a state, and Riot has said this as well, where him being balanced is him being at around 47% win rate. That is what they consider balanced. Because this champion scales so well with skill level. That's why you'll still see him in pro play, despite the fact that I think currently he has a 46% win rate in solo queue. Like, he's just that good. Brand, you will know, is one of my favorite champions to recommend lower MMR players. I'm going to make a video on him soon as well in mid lane, because I think he's still overlooked. I have made multiple videos on him, but that was quite a while ago. And I think he's fallen out of favor now, because he has received some nerfs ever since he was popularized as a jungler. I still think he's broken in mid lane, especially if you're gold and below. You can play Emax on him, and you can just murder anyone in the laning phase, and he is very obnoxious to play against. So I'm tempted to put him in S tier, and I think I just might. I think he deserves the S tier slot, because he pushes waves, he can roam very well, he has great wave clear, and he has a ton of damage for team fights, which is all that you really want at the lower end of the ladder. Cassiopeia. Oh, am I going to put Cassiopeia in S tier for low elo players? That seems insane, doesn't it? But with the buffs that Cassiopeia recently received to her mana pool, her win rate spiked from, I think, 48% to 53% in all ranks. So even in like lower MMRs, Cassiopeia is showing very, very strong win rate, and she's also just very obnoxious to play against because of how well she scales. She is very difficult. She is one of those champions that you need a lot of games to make work because of how unique she is and how much she needs to kite with her Q and her E. And if you're bad at hitting skill shots, don't play Cassiopeia. That's why you'll never catch this guy playing Cassiopeia, because I can't hit spells. I suck at hitting spells. So if you don't hit your Qs on Cassiopeia, you're pretty useless. So just be aware of that. I'm probably going to put her in A tier. I don't think I can justify putting her in S tier, but this is something that I'm very, very willing to revisit and bump her in case that's necessary. Completely forgot about Akshan. I think the champion is too hard to navigate during the mid game, so I'm going to put him in B tier, but he is incredibly, incredibly strong for the laning phase, especially if you go something like a static shiv and just permanently wave clear and roam. I think he just plays mid game a bit too uniquely for the lower ranks, if I'm super honest. I think he plays too much like an assassin, and you need to be very, very good at recognizing where enemy carries are going to maneuver onto the map and be able to catch them off guard, which I think is a skill that most people at the lower end of the ladder don't have developed. I think most people at the lower end of the ladder are good at front-to-back team fighting, but they're not that good at finding flanks, which is why you'll see a lot of champions that are great at front-to-back team fighting at the top of this list, right? Next is Corki. Corki probably goes into the D tier as well. He has terrible win rate in solo queue right now, especially at the lower end of the ladder. He just doesn't have a lot of damage. He's great in pro play because he can work very well as a weak side champion, and he scales quite well. I think he just doesn't do enough for solo queue. He is too team reliant. Although there are some fun variations on Corki where you can go tanky and kind of become a frontline threat and become impossible to one-shot, where you can carry some games like that, but I think he deserves D tier slot. His win rate is just too bad to justify moving up. Cho Gath, I think he deserves to go into the C tier. Ever since they took away Symbiotic Souls, Cho Gath mid lane is not super strong. I have somewhat made him work, but that's because I'm pretty good at playing Cho Gath. Maybe he goes in the B tier. Is Cho Gath mid as strong as Aurora? Let's think. I actually think, yeah, if you invest games into Cho Gath, yes. I think he is strong. So the build that you would run on him is, well, you have multiple variations, but Shurelia's is the tried and true, where you just run Shurelia's first item with Symbiotic Souls or with Swiftness Boots, and then you go Deadman's into Riftmaker, and you play with Hail of Blades, and you try to one-shot people. Would you take Ghost as well? Diana. I think she has to go into the S tier champion, and you'll notice this is the only champion, or one of the only champions I'm going to be putting into the S tier who is not a front-to-back teamfighting champion. Why is that? It is because Diana is one of the easiest assassins to play in the game, and she has a ton of damage. She's very obnoxious to lane against because of how unique her Q is. It's very, very difficult to dodge her Q, and she has an absolute truckload, I shall say, no swearing, of upfront damage, which is great for carrying teamfights at the lower end of the ladder. She is very proactive, she can start fights, she can find flanks, she can split push, and she has a strong laning phase at the lower end of the ladder. The only problem she has is she's not very good at dealing with tanks, so be very aware of that if you pick Diana. She cannot kill tanks very easily, so just understand that. But I think she's too obnoxious to play against and has too much damage to not put her in S tier. Ekko, I think B tier for him. He's just a weaker Diana at the lower end of the ladder. He's harder to play than Diana and way more complex. Although he can do more things and he pushes lane easier, I think he's just too complicated at the lower end of the ladder. Fizz, B tier as well. I think he's just a worse version of Diana. He's a bit more annoying. He can do more stuff in the laning phase, especially around level 3 than Diana can. But Diana just ends up being more useful in games and ends up carrying harder than Fizz does. Although they have very similar styles, right? But I think Diana can just do more. Galio, A tier. Galio is very, very annoying to play against, especially with his tank variation. He pushes waves and then he roams out onto the map and carries the game by proactivity. He does not scale incredibly well, but he does accelerate your teammates. Now, be very aware that the reason he is not going higher on this tier list and that I will refuse to ever put Galio in S tier is because he is reliant on your teammates to win the game. Galio falls off a cliff in terms of damage potential. Which means if you are against the tankier team composition, Galio cannot carry the game in fights. You can enable your AD carry and hope that they can deal damage, but if they're bad players, or they have a champion that just doesn't work, or they decide to troll the game, Galio can't carry. So that's why I'm not going to put him higher. He is great when it comes to building Hollow Radiance and then just one-shotting every single wave and exploding out onto the map and accelerating games, and he has a lot of proactive tools, and he does become a very, very strong team-fighting champion during the mid-game, but I just don't want to put him into the S tier because I don't think he's as strong as these champions, because these champions kind of do the same as Galio, except for Aurelion Sol, but they also scale into teamfight threats when it comes to damage potential. So these champions have the onus on them to carry the game, and they can accelerate their teammates. Meanwhile, Galio is better at accelerating teammates, but the onus kind of gets put onto his teammate, which I don't like. I don't like putting the onus on my teammates when I'm playing mid lane. Garen, probably an A tier as well. Garen, again, kind of has a very similar style as Galio, where he's pushing every single wave. I think he's slightly better than Galio at the lower end of the ladder. If you look at any tier list or any win rate tracker, Garen is usually top 5 in gold and below, but I think he falls off a cliff once you start hitting platinum and emerald, so that's why he's going into the A tier. But Garen can push every single wave, and he scales very well and becomes a side laning threat. He has constant priority in mid lane, and he can take plates very easily, he can split push very easily, and he can even one-shot carries during the late game stages with a full combo. So I think he does deserve to be very, very high up on this list, and I'm very tempted to put him into the S tier as well. But for now, I think I'm going to keep him into the A tier. Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger is one of those champions where at the lower end of the ladder, like really, really low ends, he's great. Like in Iron, Bronze, Heimerdinger is great. Problem is just he gets a lot weaker once you get to around Silver, Gold, and Platinum, because people start playing control mages and kind of start just murdering Heimerdinger in the laning phase. They start understanding that getting on top of him means that you'll probably die because of his tower, so they start outranging him. So I don't think he needs to be higher than B tier, to be honest. Hwei is probably a B tier as well. You might be like, wait, but you just put Akali and Azir low on the tier list because they're complicated to play, but now you're putting Hwei in B tier? What is wrong with you? To which I would respond, the only really difficult part about Hwei is getting used to the fact that you have to press 2 buttons to use your spells. And you have to keep track of more abilities. That's it. None of his spells play in a very complicated manner. He has very predefined combos. And all of his spells are very simple in terms of what they do. And mechanically, he's not very difficult. And he's not a complex champion. In terms of like, he plays fights how you think a control mage would play fights. And his abilities kind of do what it says on the box. So I don't think you need a lot of creativity. You don't need to manage soldiers like Azir. You don't need to kite very well like you do Akali and use your shroud well. You just fire out spells and that's it. It's very, very predefined what he does. Irelia, C tier. Think she's too difficult. And a lot of people at the lower end of the ladder, when they play Irelia, end up getting caught up in the dopamine where they're flying everywhere on the wave. And then all of a sudden they get ganked by a jungler and they're dead. And she sucks at team fighting. She is a good side lane threat though. But if you want to play a side lane threat that pushes and wins lane, Garen, Diana, these champions could do the same thing. Except they're also good in team fights and they're easier to play. So why would you play Irelia? Unless you just find her a lot of fun. I don't think I want to do Karma or Kassadin. Karma for the lower end, like she's not played that much mid lane right now. And Karthus has not really played mid lane that much right now either. Kassadin, where should he go? He scales very well, but he's very unique in the laning phase. And usually people end up not knowing how to get minions well enough that he doesn't get online. So I think I'm going to C or B probably. Now, if you're a Smurf and you're playing Kassadin in low elo, this champion immediately S+, right? But the main skill on Kassadin, and the main reason he's not going to be higher up on this tier list, is he's difficult to get resources on. And what I mean by that is you have to be very efficient and collect a lot of minions to get to your level 16 as quickly as possible. And Kassadin is very unique in the sense that he has to drop a lot of minions in the laning phase. And then he doesn't have great wave clear in like a very traditional sense like Anivia or any of these top champions do. But he does scale very well. But the problem is people usually can't get there in time at the lower end of the ladder because they don't know how to collect minions very well. So I'm going to put him a bit lower. Katarina. I think if you invest a lot of time into her, she probably goes into B and A tier. But I don't want to put her very high. She kind of goes against everything that I try to teach as a mid laner. She breaks a lot of rules that I think you should learn as a mid laner. Although you can solo carry games with her, but she's difficult to play. She has a lot of bad matchups. She can get shut down in team fights very easily. She's not a side lane threat. But if you get ahead of her and you snowball on her, you can 1v9 fights. But so can any of these other champions, right? She has a lot of competition. I just don't think she quite gets there. Kayle, probably an A tier. She's just Kassadin, but better. And what I mean by that is she's a lot easier to get resources on because of her wave clearing ability and the fact that she is ranged. But she also becomes very obnoxious at level 16, just like Kassadin does. She's just a lot more straightforward to play than Kassadin. So that's why she's going to go a lot higher on the tier list. But she's an absolute menace when she gets to level 11. She can wave clear very, very quickly, and then you can accelerate to level 16. And then once that gets hit, you do 1v9 team fights. The only reason she's not going higher is I think she has a very, very low player base right now, so it's kind of skewed. But she has an incredibly high win rate. She's been sitting at the top of win rates in gold and below for like months at this point. So I think she deserves to go up there. Who's next? LeBlanc. She was recently buffed. Where should she go? B tier probably? I don't think the buffs were significant enough to really shift her around. The buffs kind of helps with her wave clearing ability. The problem LeBlanc has at the lower end of the ladder is the absolute best you can do on this champion in a team fight is one-shot the enemy AD carry. Which, nice, now you have a 5v4, but you also do have 10 seconds where you're not doing anything. And if your AD carry sucks, and the enemy team has a front line, and you're one-shotting the enemy AD carry, well, the enemy front line is still going to murder you in the 10 second of downtime that you have. So I would much rather see you play a different champion than LeBlanc. Like, play a Diana if you like playing assassins. She is just better. What is next? Lissandra? Oh, maybe I should have a counter pick tier, but Lissandra, probably B tier as well, to be honest. Better than LeBlanc for sure, but I'm not going to order it in the tier. I think Lissandra is B tier. She has good wave clear. She scales pretty well, but she has a lot of very, very rough matchups. She is good against most of these champions, except for these three up here. She's good against a lot of the mid-range champions that like dashing around everywhere, but she can get really blasted by control mages. Like, she has very, very tough matchup against control mages. Although there is a new build that has recently started popping up on her, much like some of the other champions I'm going to talk about, like Vex and Ahri. Blackfire Torch and Cosmic Drive has been popping up on Lissandra to help deal with frontline, which I think can actually make her a bit more viable. I'm still going to put her in B tier, but I'm actually very interested to see if maybe she deserves A tier. I'm going to have to revisit this tier list on the next patch to kind of readjust some things, depending on what I see. AP Kog Maw, I think he's too hard to play at the lower end of the ladder. He scales incredibly well, but he has a lot of tough matchups. If you get to level 16 on this champion, he will murder everyone. I recorded a video on him and then decided to not release it because I actually don't want to encourage people to play this champion mid lane. I think he's too unique. He's very good against a lot of champions, and you might even start seeing him in pro play, but there are just better champions that are going to be coming further down the tier list when it comes to carrying at the lower end of the ladder. But if you can get to level 16 on this guy and you like playing artillery mages, Kog Maw is great. But I think he just has a lot of rough matchups, and he's very unique in the way that he plays. I think Lux will just always deserve 8 here at the lower end of the ladder. Very fast wave clear, one-shot potential, and she can poke. The only problem I have with her is she has 4 skill shots, so if you, like me, suck at hitting skill shots, this champion is not for you. That's why you will not catch me playing this champion. Too many skill shots, and I can't hit them. Like, you will see my skill shots flying from Asia to North America over the Pacific. That's what's going to happen. Is that the Pacific? Yeah, it is. Malphite mid lane, great as a counter pick, sucks as a blind pick against AD champions. This guy's S tier. As a blind pick, he's C tier because you just get outranged. Yeah. He just isn't better than Galio. Galio works way better than he does as a blind pick. But against AD champions like Zed, Qiyana, Irelia, this guy immediately jumps up to S tier. Who is next? Malzahar. Does Malzahar deserve S+? No, I don't think so. I think Malzahar is still S tier. Who's going in S+ then if Malzahar isn't? But yeah, I mean, you all know why Malzahar is great at the low end of the ladder. He scales very well, he pushes waves, and he has CC for people that dive in. You could save a lot of tempo because of how fast you push waves. You don't have to be on the wave when you push it. And he's very annoying to break in the laning phase. You have to understand ranges and cooldowns very well, and you have to be very aggressive when you try to kill the Malzahar in the lane. And usually people at the lower end of the ladder can't do that, so Malzahar gets the scale for free. And if Malzahar gets the scale, he becomes absolutely obnoxious. Mel, I think C tier. She was recently buffed. Maybe she deserves B tier. Yeah, I think B tier. She is worse than some of these other champions up here, but she can do very well once you get into the mid game on her. She has very low cooldowns. I think the problem is just she doesn't have a ton of damage, and she sucks at dealing with tanks. And she's quite unique to play. You need to use your W very well, and you need to space quite well and be very patient in fights. I think there are champions on this list that will just do what she does, but better. Who's next? Where were we? We were at M. Naafiri? Does she deserve S+? Let's think. If Diana isn't S+, is Naafiri S+? No, probably not. Naafiri is the AD version of Diana. Anything I said for Diana counts for Naafiri as well. Naafiri is great. Why? Because she's very simple to play. If you want to play an AD assassin, play Naafiri mid lane. You might not see her at the higher end of the ladder in mid lane, but that doesn't matter. This is a tier list for the lower end of the ladder. She's very simple to play, very straightforward to play. She can one-shot people very easily, and she scales very well, and she is an assassin. So, yeah. She's great for the lower end of the ladder. Very good for the lower end of the ladder. Morgana mid might be the first S+. If Morgana mid goes into S+, then I feel like Anivia also has to go into S+. Actually, no, let's keep Anivia in S. Morgana kind of does what Anivia does, but a bit better. In the sense that she can push the wave faster than Anivia, and she can pick people from range during the mid game. So I think Morgana deserves S+. You'll run Blackfire Torch into something like either Horizon Focus or Liandry's if you want damage potential, and then you can just fish for bindings at max range at all times, and you have permanent priority. The weakness of this champion is not going to be exploited at the lower end of the ladder. The weakness of Morgana is she has no tools to trade in the laning phase, like none at all. If you walk at her and you dodge her binding, she has nothing. So you can force her off the wave very easily without letting her push. But that's never going to happen at the lower end of the ladder because that requires you to have pretty intricate knowledge of how to force trades, which people don't. So I think she deserves to be S+. She just pushes waves, scales very well, and roams a lot during the early stages, helps her teammates, and then scales well into team fights, which is what you want. Neeko, C tier. She's a worse version of all of these champions. She has proactivity for sure. Like, you can make picks with Neeko with your passive into ult combo, but can you make more picks than Diana? No. Do you perform better in team fights than a Morgana and Malzahar? No. Okay, so what is your unique thing? Your unique thing is you can sometimes catch people off guard by disguising yourself as a minion, which does work a lot in low elo, by the way. But I still think you'll be better off picking another champion. Orianna. Now, if we were talking about my personal tier list here, she's going S+, because this is the champion that I've had the absolute best performance with this season. But I think objectively she is worse than a lot of other control mages. I think I would much rather see someone at the lower end play Lux, Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, Anivia than I would see them play Orianna. She's a bit too complicated with how her ball works. She's a bit too unique. She does not work very well against tanks. She has a pretty strong laning phase if you are an aggressive player, but she's very unique to understand, so I don't want to put her high up on this tier list. If you have a lot of games on her, she can for sure shift to A tier. Like, she has a lot of very high potential, but actually, let's put her in B tier. There's no way I can put her next to, like, Neeko. There's just no way. She's better than Neeko. Who's next? Qiyana? Qiyana is actually pretty good, but she was recently nerfed, so I don't think she needs to be very high up on the tier list. Maybe she can shift around. Maybe she can go to A tier. But I feel like after the nerfs, she's not that strong. I would much rather see you play something like a Naafiri or a Diana, despite the fact that at the higher end of the ladder, you will see Qiyana, but she's very, very complex in the angles that you have to find to be able to make the champion work. She accelerates games very, very well, and she takes advantage of objective fights very, very well, but that's about it. She's very, very weird to navigate in the laning phase. She's very weak early game, and she's very weird to navigate in team fights, so I don't want to put her higher. Ryze. Again, one of the champions, much like Azir, who's balanced for pro play. So, like, he is balanced around people understanding how his ult works at the highest end of the ladder and using his pushing potential to accelerate the game. I think he is actually, like, pretty worthy of going higher up on the ladder, but I think the win rates just work too much against him. So I don't want to put him higher. He has a lot of potential in the sense that he can deal a ton of damage in fights. He scales incredibly well. He pushes the laning, or during the laning phase with EQ. He can roam pretty well with his ult, and he has set up with his E and W, and yet somehow his win rate just looks terrible. Like, in my head, he has all of the things that should put him up in the S tier. But be it difficulty or be it whatever, for some reason his win rate just isn't catching up with how, like, I perceive his strengths to be. So I'm not going to put him higher, but I don't understand why his win rate is so bad, I will say. Probably difficulty, but so it goes, I suppose. Who's next? Seraphine? Do we really want to judge her? No, I don't think so. She's kind of been shifted into support at this point. That was a period in time where Seraphine could be played mid lane. If you are playing her mid lane, she probably goes into the B tier. She pushes waves. She scales very well. She becomes a team fighting menace. She works very well with bruisers, but outside of that, she's not great. She does have A tier potential, though. If she ever, like, maybe with Blackfire Torch Cosmic Drive, she can go into the A tier. I haven't seen her enough to judge, though. I am very tempted to test her out, though. Let me know if you want to see some Seraphine gameplay. I'll probably play it on stream if people want to see it. Because I think this actually has potential. I'm just thinking, like, cooldown reduction is being built a lot, like, with Blackfire Torch Cosmic Drive. So you could probably go Blackfire Torch Serath's Cosmic Drive and then spam CDR. Maybe just Blackfire Torch Cosmic Drive and get online at 2 items. With WMAX second, you have a ton of shielding potential, and you can land some massive ults with her. She's probably just very team comp dependent, I would say. Who's next? Sion. Do I want to rank Sion as a mid laner? He's been played a little bit in pro play. I don't think he sees enough play in solo queue to rank him. If I were to rank him, he'd probably go in A tier or B tier. One of the two. Probably high B tier. Smolder. I think Smolder is C tier. I think he's so underwhelming every time I see him, right? And every time I play him, he feels underwhelming. In the sense that, like, he feels great in the laning phase. And it sounds very weird, right? It's like, what do you mean he feels great in the laning phase? But once you get to Essence Reaver and you can one-shot minions with your Q, or you can one-shot minions with WQ at level 9. He feels awesome in terms of the wave clear that he has, but then in mid-game fights, he just feels so weak. And then you're like, oh, finally, I hit 225 stacks on Smolder. Surely I can 1v9 and come back into the game now. But even that feels underwhelming. Like, 225 stacks on Smolder is not as broken as it was on release. So I don't think he needs to go very, very high on the tier list, to be honest. Swain. Swain is one of those champions that in certain games, S+ tier immediately. Like, he can 1v9 games if there's like low damage team compositions on the enemy team. Like, if the enemy team only has damage from their AD carry and they have like maybe a control mage mid laner, a bruiser jungler, a tank top lane, and a tank support, Swain can 1v9 the game for sure. And in other games where the enemy team just has a bit of CC and a ton of damage, Swain gets blown up in his D tier. So I think overall I'm probably just going to put him in B tier as well. Some games he's great, some games he's very weak. But this B tier is a bit misleading, I feel like. Because some of these champions in some games, S tier. In other games, B tier or a C tier. Yeah, same with the C tier, I guess. But so it goes, right? Like, so goes your tier lists, I suppose. I wonder who's going to join Morgana in S+. I might have to shift the list around a little bit. I feel like there should be more champions at the very top. Sylas, I think he's too difficult to play at the lower end of the ladder. If you love fighting, if you love playing a champion that goes in and fights and carries the game through fighting, Diana is your champion. Sylas is better at the higher end of the ladder, I will say, because he can do things Diana can't do in terms of forcing fights and staying alive more than Diana can. But Diana is 10 times easier to play and 10 times easier to play in the laning phase, so that's why I'd recommend her over Sylas. Syndra, I think she just doesn't have enough damage right now, especially not at the lower end of the ladder. She scales very well. She's pretty decent at the higher end of the ladder. Lower end of the ladder, I'd much rather see you play a Malzahar, an Aurelion Sol, an Anivia, a Brand, a Lux even. I'd probably take you playing Orianna over playing Syndra, to be honest, and Mel, because they're a lot more predefined in terms of how they want to play. Syndra is quite complex in the way that you have to use your Q to line up your E, and you have to position very, very safely because you die to anything, and you have no tools to get anyone off of you. Like, if an assassin gets on top of you and you're playing Syndra, you're probably dead. So you have to position incredibly well. Talia, S tier, S+ tier, S tier, S+ tier, S tier. She pushes waves, she scales very well, you can play her very simply. She is a pretty complex champion, so you'll need to invest quite a few games into her, but you don't need to understand how her ult works to see success on her. You can play her as a regular control mage and you'll do very well on her because she pushes waves and she roams. And she scales very well, and she has a lot of control in teamfights with her E. Once you get that E down over the entire fight, enemy team can no longer dash, and you can usually pick people with your W. And yeah, I mean, I will say the one thing to be aware of is right now the build on her is Sereths into Rylai's, which is very, very like vegan in the sense that you don't really deal any damage. So be very aware of that fact. You might need to play something like a Blackfire Torch instead. Blackfire Torch Cosmic Drive can do very well. But the build you'll see in pro play is Sereths into Rylai's, but you don't really deal any damage with that. So be a bit aware of that. What is next? What is next? Talon? Just go play Naafiri instead, man. This champion blows in solo queue right now. Tristana? Probably your best option as an AD carry champion for the lower end of the ladder. She has a strong laning phase, she scales incredibly well, and she has one-shot potential in the laning phase. Only reason you're not seeing her in pro play right now is against better players, her laning phase kind of sucks. But I think she's great for the lower end of the ladder. It's the AD champion that I play in, on my main account as well in Challenger. I think she's pretty strong. If you need like an AD carry from mid lane because your jungler is playing like Diana or Maokai or something like that and you have full AP, but you need like, you can't play Garen because the enemy team, or you can't play Naafiri or Garen because the enemy team has a lot of tank champions, and well, playing those champions into tanks is kind of suicidal, and your AD carry is a low damage threat. Maybe your AD carry is playing something like Swain or like a mage or something like that, a Ziggs. Then Tristana is great. Very high DPS champion, scales incredibly well, has a pretty strong laning phase, and becomes a side lane threat. Tryndamere, A tier? B tier? A tier? I think Tryndamere at the lower end of the ladder is great because he scales incredibly well. He's very obnoxious to play against. People don't really understand how he works. you can usually end up winning the laning phase. He has a lot of sustain, and he becomes a side lane threat. He is the one champion on this list, I will say, where you kind of have to win through side lane. Usually, the way that I like to value champions at the lower end of the ladder in terms of side lane threat is how well can you leverage a strong side lane into a team fight, because that's usually how games will end, especially at the lower end of the ladder. Like, you have to team fight to win games. Tryndamere doesn't do that. Tryndamere pushes side lane, and then he keeps pushing side lane. So be very aware of that. He is a true side laning champion, a true split pusher. Whereas most of the other champions here, like Garen, Naafiri, and Kayle, are more like side lane threats into team fighting threats. Twisted Fate, just Galio, but worse. Too reliant on your teammates. He deals no damage. He just spams CC, and that's about it. He does not need to be very high on this list. Very, very difficult for him to carry. Veigar, S+. Can push waves, can set up, scales very, very well, has very high damage during the late game stages. Actually, no, S. He probably goes S, and then Anivia, Aurelion Sol go above him. No, Diana goes S+ then. Naafiri would go S+ as well then. I think this looks better, actually. Yeah, this looks more solid. Diana is so strong that she needs to be S+. Anivia can be S+ as well, I think. She's Morgana, but scales well, like more control-y than Morgana is. Veigar has the weakness of he doesn't push until he gets level 9. These other champions come online very, very early into the game. Morgana starts one-shotting waves at level 5. Anivia starts killing waves level 6. Veigar needs level 9 to start killing waves. Brand also needs quite a few levels to start killing waves. Same with these champions. They just come online a little bit too late. But Veigar makes up for it by scaling better than any of these champions. He becomes an absolute menace. The thing about Veigar is you need to accept that there are some games that are just going to be lost when you're playing Veigar because he comes online too late, and you need to play very individualistically, and you need to get 3 items on him, and then you can carry games, right? So that should be your number one priority when you play this champion. Who is next? Vex. Vex recently received a new build that I think actually puts her in A tier, even at the lower end of the ladder. Very straightforward to play her. The new build is Blackfire Torch with Cosmic Drive, with Phase Rush as your keystone instead of Electrocute. The reason this works so well is it gives you a lot of spell rotations, and it allows Vex to beat team compositions where she previously was very, very bad. And those are the kind of tankier team compositions, right? Which is usually comps that Vex likes playing against, because it is comps against champions that have a lot of dashes. And I think this champion is also just great because people at the lower end of the ladder love playing champions that dash. And she is pretty strong in laning phase. So I think she actually deserves A tier. I think people are sleeping on how strong this champion is. Especially with this new build coming out that gives you a lot of versatility. Where you can play Luden's Shadowflame Deathcap, or you can play Blackfire Torch Cosmic Drive Deathcap. She has a lot of tools now to deal with tankier team compositions, which a lot of these champions don't, which is why they go lower. Victor. Too slow for low elo. Too slow for low elo. Probably about as bad as Syndra. I'd much rather see you on Hwei and Mel and Orianna. Those champions all come online faster than Victor and are easier to play in team fights than Victor. Victor is just too slow. The reason you're seeing him in pro games is he has a pretty strong laning phase in the sense that he can neutralize matchups very, very easily. But in the chaotic state of solo queue, he's just too slow, and he's not very good in mid-game fights. You need all of your evolves. You need to play like a Rod of Ages into Liandry's, into Deathcap. You don't come online until like 3rd, 4th item. And you don't come online like a Veigar comes online, or an Aurelion Sol, or a Malzahar. You come online in the sense that like you still need to play very, very well to play fights. So I think he just deserves to be C tier. I don't think he should go higher. Xerath. No, I have other champions I need to rate. Twitch. Does he deserve A tier? He's very unique, but he is incredibly strong. Like, he is absurdly strong. Especially with Press the Attack. Now I'm working with his poison. Like, you deal so much damage with Twitch. And people don't know how to lane against him. I actually think A tier is deserved. Like, recently they changed Press the Attack to work with Twitch Poison. So the build that you're running on Twitch is actually AP to maximize your poison damage. Your E has an absurd 210% AP scaling if you have all 5 poison procs hit, right? So usually at level 5, you'll be dealing like 400 damage with your E if you have full poison proc. And then with press the attack and your poison on top, you're usually dealing around 800, 900 damage in an all-in. Like, this champion works insanely well. And you just one-shot waves, stealth, and then you can either kill the enemy laner if they overextend and try to match you, like try to stop you from roaming, or you can roam on the map and you have stealth to get around wards, and you scale very well as well. The only problem is you have some very, very bad matchups. Any champion that can just lock you down, or any champion that can get on top of you or outrange you, is very difficult to deal with. Like, you have to be very creative with your stealth usage to beat a lot of the ranged matchups that you have, or that you'll run into. So be very aware of that. But I think he deserves A tier. I know it's going to sound strange, but I swear this champion is so strong. And he scales so well. Vel Koz? Horizon Focus was buffed, but is he not just a worse version of like Xerath and Hwei? Like, he does a ton of damage, don't get me wrong, but I think he's too hard to play. If you are a strong Vel Koz player, he's A tier, right? But I think if you're just an average Vel Koz player, he's very difficult to make useful. He has a strong laning phase. He's one of the strongest laning control, artillery mages that we have. And he gets online very, very early. And he's kind of a combination of artillery and burst mage, because he does so much damage with his passive, which is also true damage, right? But I think there's no way he's worse than Victor, right? But you just have to be good at him is the problem. Like, that's why I'm so hesitant to put him higher. If you are a good Vel Koz player, he goes way higher. But you have to be good at him because he's all skill shots and it's very unique skill shots. If you're a Vel Koz one trick, he probably goes A tier. If you're not a Vel Koz one trick, I think C tier makes sense. Vlad, I think he's too slow. He can 1v9 fights. I actually think with the new Horizon Focus Deathcap build, he probably deserves B tier because a lot of people struggle with breaking him in the laning phase. The problem being is he's just not as much of he's less consistent in laning phase than these champions, and he scales about as well as them, if not a bit worse. So yeah, he has worse matchups than these champions up here as well. But if you get a good Vlad game, you get through the laning phase, you get to play your 10 CS per minute, you get 2 items, and then you get into mid game. I mean, he's obviously an S+ tier champion in those instances. But overall, you can run into some pretty nasty matchups in mid lane. You can run into team compositions that have point-and-click CC. You can get blasted in the laning phase. Your teammates can lose early, in which case you can't help them, whereas these other champions all have tools to get around that. But Vlad doesn't, so that's why he deserves B tier, I think. Xerath, you're going to be very surprised, but I honestly think he deserves S tier. Now, you're going to be like, Espen, did you not just put Vel Koz in C tier and you're going to put Xerath in S tier? Yes. And I know it's going to be crazy. I know you're going to think I'm making a massive mistake here. And you're like, Xerath should go Z tier for sure, bro. But I think Xerath is kind of straightforward in the way that he uses his spells. He is all skill shots. So if you're bad at hitting skill shots, don't play him. But he scales incredibly well. He has great wave clear. He's longer range than all the other champions. And his spells are kind of straightforward to use. He has this lovely benefit of he is able to prolong games due to his wave clear and due to the fact that he can cast his Q while being in Fog of War and then hit the enemy champions. His Q range is longer than vision range, which means usually you can poke people out from Fog. And once you hit 3 items on him, once you hit Luden's Horizon Focus Deathcap, your Q does 600 damage to people. And you can one-shot people with your ult. Like, I have seen this champion be so high on the win rate, on tier lists for win rates, and I've seen him do so well in solo queue that despite the fact that I think he is a difficult champion to play at the higher end of the ladder because he requires very good positioning, I think at the lower end of the ladder, he is just so long range that you can get you naturally end up positioning very far back. Whereas champions like Victor, Vel Koz, and Syndra, they need to get closer range than Xerath does. Which I think just means that the fact that he's immobile and doesn't have tools to get people off of him doesn't matter as much because he's longer range. And he's one of those unique champions that can completely warp a game. Like, he can single-handedly keep the game going because of his poke and wave clear. And the fact that people just are not good at engaging and are not good at following up on engages and are not good at creating picks. He can keep games going because of that. He is so long range that he's very difficult to pick if he plays safely. And people need coordination to break him, and they just don't have that in solo queue. I think he is a champion that right now just warps entirety of solo queue, which is crazy to say about Xerath. And it's crazy to put him this high up. I think he goes way lower the higher up you go on the ladder, by the way. Which is weird, because you think Xerath is a champion that scales with skill, which he does do. But I don't know, man. I've just seen too much success from this champion to put him lower. Which sounds weird, but yeah. Yasuo. Yeah, we all know Yasuo. 0-10 power spike. Of course, like, Yasuo is one of the most obnoxious champions to play against, so S+ tier. But I think in terms of actually looking at his result and his usefulness in games, he's not very good. He's too hard to navigate in team fights. You have compositions where you just can't do anything because you don't have knockups or the enemy team has hard CC. Very, very high skill ceiling champion. Just don't think he deserves to be very high on the list. I think he's too hard. I'd rather see you play Naafiri. I'd rather see you play Garen. I'd rather see you play Tryndamere because they are a lot easier to play than Yasuo and they can get the same work done. Yone, I think he has the same issue as Yasuo, but he's slightly better. He's a bit more straightforward to play, and he has more team fighting prowess due to his ult and due to his E. So you don't have to like fully commit, and you are not as team reliant as Yasuo is. If Yasuo doesn't have knockups, good luck ever playing a team fight. You're now a side laning champion. Whereas Yone, if you don't have knockups, well, Yone doesn't need knockups. He can be his own knockup. So I think Yone is slightly better than Yasuo due to that. Who else? Zed. Zed is one of those champions that is purposely kept low. He's purposely kept weak because he's very obnoxious to play against. So I understand that playing against Zed feels very frustrating, but understand that this champion is just like numerically very, very weak. The reason he's numerically very, very weak is because he has a very unintuitive laning pattern and play pattern, so people don't really know how to beat him, but he actually doesn't win a lot of games. He's just very weird to play against in lane, and people don't perform very well against him in laning phase. Or well, the funny part is people actually perform well against Zed in the laning phase, but they feel like they don't perform very well against him in the laning phase because of how weird he is to play against. And he just feels very bad to play against. But he actually just loses a lot of games. Like, he doesn't win games, and he doesn't get advantages in laning phase. Like, he just doesn't. He has a very unique play pattern and a very obnoxious play pattern, but he isn't good as a champion. He just isn't right now. He's purposefully kept weak, so understand that. Ziggs, and this is going to sound crazy, but Ziggs is just a worse version of Xerath right now, which is so insane to say, but he just is a worse version of Xerath, which sounds absurd even in my head. Because in my head, I've always said Ziggs is just a better version of Xerath. But right now, the results that I'm seeing is Ziggs is just worse than Xerath, objectively. Which is crazy, by the way. But yeah, Ziggs deserves A tier. He's slightly worse than Xerath, but he still pushes waves, scales very well, can take towers very easily, and is very obnoxious to play against. He's just slightly shorter range than Xerath, and his Q is not instant, whereas Xerath's is, which means it's a lot easier to hit Xerath Q than it is to hit Ziggs Q. But I mean, Ziggs is still great as a champion because he pushes waves, scales very well, takes towers, and he can work as a one-shot champion after his buffs. You can run Luden's Shadow Flame and Deathcap ever since he got those AP ratio buffs. Or you can run a more tank shredder build where you play like a Blackfire Torch Xerath's Deathcap or Blackfire Torch Liandry's Deathcap or something like that, right? Last, Zoe. Probably Z tier. I don't think she's annoying to play against in laning phase. She's very unintuitive to play against, but she doesn't carry games. She doesn't win games. Like, she can 1v9 games where the enemy team is full squishy and hitting a bubble kills them, but in terms of actually like making her useful in a majority of games, she's just too difficult because one frontline on the enemy team that can tank your bubble, yeah, good luck ever getting anything done. Or you're playing against someone in mid lane who actually knows how to dodge your bubble. Your champion is now useless. So I think she's kind of a little bit too weak at the moment as well. But yeah, that's going to be it for the tier list. Oh my god, we went through every single champion. Let me know if I missed one, and I will respond in the comments if I missed a champion. So please do let me know, because I might have missed some. Or I might have made a decision to not include someone because I think no one cares about the champion. And then, well, if you're sitting out there and you're like, bro, where's my Pantheon? Where's my Jace? Where's my Karma? Then I will happily respond in the comments. But until someone says something, I will not. If you want to ask questions as well, by the way, join the Discord. I'm way more likely to respond in there in like an actual in-depth response. Comments, I will read them and give a quick answer, but that's about it. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the tier list. Have a good one. See ya. Bye.